The Bible, revered by many as the sacred word of God. But is it really a work of God? Or is it simply a collection of copied or rewritten stories woven together from ancient mythologies? The typical Christian defense to these types of allegations consists of responses that are heavily or solely reliant upon blind faith and no factual evidence. These arguments usually go something like this: the Bible is the Word of God, because the Bible tells you so. If that's the case, you should also believe that I'm your uncle, because I am your uncle, and I am because I just told you that I was. I already know your counter-argument, and we'll get to it soon. For now, let's just stick to you allowing me to present the supporting evidence that you need to see. Evidence for the idea that the Bible, a text held sacred by billions, might not be an original work of divine inspiration, but a collection of stories, characters, and ideas borrowed from earlier mythologies. Then you can make an informed decision on what you choose to believe. We'll explore the uncanny similarities between the tales of the Bible and those of previous cultures. For instance, the Genesis flood story remarkably mirrors the Epic of Gilgamesh, an ancient Mesopotamian tale. The decision to send a flood, the selection of a righteous man to build an ark, and even the landing of the ark on a mountain, all these elements are shared between the two narratives. And it's not just the Old Testament. Even the story of Jesus Christ, the central figure of Christianity, has been said to be a collection of elements lifted from various earlier stories. Healings, resurrection, the title of Son of God, these motifs are not exclusive to the New Testament, but can be traced back to earlier tales. We'll also be taking a critical look at some of the contradictions within the Bible itself. Conflicting accounts of the angel's message to Joseph and Mary, differing interpretations of the word virgin, and discrepancies in Jesus' genealogy, all these raise serious questions about the Bible's consistency and reliability. Are these similarities and contradictions mere coincidence? Or do they suggest that the writers of the Bible were influenced by prior tales, weaving together a tapestry of borrowed narratives to create a new mythology? This is not an attempt to discredit or dismiss the faith of anyone. Rather, it's an exploration of a compelling perspective that challenges the conventional understanding of the Bible. Let's look at the evidence that raises questions about the Bible's originality and reliability. The Genesis flood story, a tale familiar to many, shares an uncanny resemblance with the Epic of Gilgamesh. A tale from ancient Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh predates the Bible by centuries, yet its narrative echoes loudly in the Genesis flood story. In both tales, a cataclysmic flood is sent to cleanse the earth of its corrupt inhabitants. The divine decision to send a flood is a narrative element present in both accounts. In Genesis, it is the God of Abraham who decides to flood the earth due to the wickedness of man. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, it is the council of gods who decide to flood the earth, similarly disappointed by humanity's corruption. The selection of a righteous man to build an ark is another shared narrative element. In Genesis, Noah, a man described as blameless among the people of his time, is chosen to build an ark and save a remnant of life from the impending deluge. The Epic of Gilgamesh tells a similar tale about a man named Utnapishtim, who is warned by the god Ea about the imminent flood and instructed to build a boat to save himself, his family, and a selection of animals. Both stories also share the narrative detail of the ark landing on a mountain after the flood. In Genesis, Noah's ark comes to rest on the mountains of Ararat. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, Utnapishtim's boat lodges on the mountain of Nisir. What's more, both stories conclude with the protagonist offering a sacrifice to their respective gods, who in turn make a covenant never to destroy the earth by flood again. These striking similarities suggest that the writers of Genesis may have been influenced by the Epic of Gilgamesh or a common source. Could it be that this biblical story, revered by many as divine revelation, was borrowed from an earlier tale? It's important to note that the Genesis flood story and the Epic of Gilgamesh are not the only flood narratives in ancient literature. Flood myths are a common theme in many cultures around the world, from the ancient Greeks and Romans to indigenous tribes in the Americas and Australia. This raises further questions about the originality of the Genesis flood story. The parallels between these two stories are striking, but the flood story isn't the only biblical narrative with potential predecessors. As we delve deeper, we'll find that several other biblical narratives may also have been influenced by earlier tales. This begs the question, is the Bible a unique divine revelation or a collection of borrowed tales? The figure of Jesus Christ, central to Christianity, might be a compilation of elements from various earlier stories. This isn't a statement you hear every day, but it's a fascinating hypothesis to explore. Let's consider the story of Jesus Christ. It's filled with miracles and wonders, teachings of love and forgiveness, and a message of salvation. But are these elements original to the Bible? Many scholars argue that the character of Jesus shares striking similarities with figures from earlier mythologies. Some of these elements include healing the sick, resurrecting the dead, and being referred to as the Son of God. Let's take a closer look at these elements. The first one, healing the sick. This is a common theme in many mythologies and religious texts predating Christianity. For instance, the Egyptian god Horus was known to have healing powers, as was Asclepius, the Greek god of medicine. Could the writers of the New Testament have borrowed this element to enhance the character of Jesus? The next element, resurrection. The concept of resurrection is found in several ancient religions. In Egyptian mythology, the god Osiris was killed and then resurrected by his wife Isis. The Greek god Dionysus was also said to have been born twice. Is it possible that the story of Jesus' resurrection was inspired by these earlier tales, and finally, being referred to as the Son of God? This too has parallels in other mythologies. The pharaohs of ancient Egypt were often referred to as the son of Ra, the sun god. Similarly, in Roman mythology, Hercules was the son of Zeus, the king of the gods. Could the title Son of God attributed to Jesus have been borrowed from these traditions? This is not to say that the character of Jesus Christ is a mere copy of earlier figures. Rather, it suggests that the writers of the New Testament may have drawn from a rich tapestry of mythologies to create a character that resonated with their audience. It's a testament to the interconnectedness of human cultures and the universal themes that permeate our collective consciousness. But this hypothesis is not without its critics. Some argue that these similarities are mere coincidences or that they reflect universal human experiences rather than borrowed elements. Others contend that the writers of the New Testament were simply recording historical events as they happened, without any influence from earlier mythologies. However, the similarities between Jesus Christ and earlier figures are too significant to be ignored. The similarities between Jesus Christ and earlier figures are thought-provoking, but the issues with the Bible don't end there. Let's take a look at some of the contradictions within the Bible. The Bible, despite being considered inerrant by many, is riddled with contradiction. For starters, we have the angel's message to Joseph and Mary. In the book of Matthew, it's Joseph who is visited by the angel in a dream, being told of Mary's miraculous pregnancy. Contrarily, in the book of Luke, it's Mary who receives the angelic visitation, with Joseph seemingly out of the loop. Two books, two different accounts, a bit puzzling for a book that's supposed to be the infallible word of God, isn't it? Next, we come to the interpretation of the word virgin. In the Old Testament, the Hebrew word alma was used, which merely means young woman. However, when the Bible was translated into Greek, alma was translated into parthenos, which explicitly means virgin. This has led to the widespread belief in Mary's virgin birth, a belief potentially founded on a mistranslation. Quite the game of Chinese whispers, don't you think? Finally, let's talk genealogy. In the New Testament, both Matthew and Luke attempt to trace Jesus' lineage back to David, but they can't seem to agree on the details. Matthew traces the line through Joseph, Jesus' legal father, while Luke traces it through Mary. Moreover, the number of generations they each list between David and Jesus also differs. Matthew lists 28 generations, while Luke lists 42. These contradictions aren't minor typos or inconsequential discrepancies. They're fundamental differences that alter key aspects of Christian belief and narrative. They question the very fabric of the Bible's claim to be the unerring Word of God. They shake the Bible's supposed historical accuracy and, in turn, its claim to truth. In light of these contradictions, can we truly accept the Bible as an accurate historical document? Or does it lean more towards a collection of stories, perhaps borrowed, perhaps embellished, but certainly not without their share of inconsistencies? These contradictions further complicate the Bible's claim to truth and originality. The evidence we've examined today presents a compelling case for the Bible as a work of fiction. Just think about it. We've probed the depths of ancient mythology, delving into tales that predate the Bible by centuries, even millennia. And what did we find? Startling similarities, stories that echo through time, changing, morphing, but retaining their core essence. It's like a game of cosmic Chinese whispers, where the message gets distorted yet somehow remains the same. Take the Genesis flood story, for instance. It bears an uncanny resemblance to the Epic of Gilgamesh, a tale from ancient Mesopotamia. In both stories, a devastating flood is sent to wipe out humanity, and a righteous man is chosen to build an ark and save the world's species. The ark lands on a mountain in both stories, and the survivors are blessed. It's hard not to see the parallels. And then we have the figure of Jesus Christ, revered by billions. Yet his story appears to be a patchwork quilt of elements borrowed from earlier narratives. Healing the sick, bringing the dead back to life, being referred to as the Son of God. These are motifs that have appeared in myths and legends predating Christianity. But it's not just the similarities with earlier works that cast a shadow of doubt on the Bible's originality. The Bible itself contains contradictions that raise questions about its reliability. We find conflicting accounts of the angel's message to Joseph and Mary, different interpretations of the word virgin, and discrepancies in Jesus' genealogy. If the Bible is the infallible Word of God, how do we explain these inconsistencies? Together, these factors paint a picture of the Bible not as a divine revelation, but as a collection of stories, borrowed, adapted, and woven together into a compelling narrative. It's a testament to the power of storytelling, to our collective fascination with the eternal questions of where we come from, why we're here, and what happens after we die. Whether you choose to believe in the Bible as the Word of God or see it as a work of fiction, one thing is clear: its narratives are not as unique and original as they appear. And that's okay, because at the end of the day, whether it's fact or fiction, the Bible has shaped our world in profound ways. It has inspired millions, provided comfort and guidance, and sparked countless debates. And perhaps that's the real power of a good story.